Hey guys, I wanted to talk quickly about my latest painting, which was a bit of an adventure for me. I haven't really been allowing myself to try masterpieces, but part of my New Year's resolution was to give masterpieces a shot, just to see what I was having issues with, where I slowed down the most. As I suspected, of course, all of my specialty goes into portraits, so I had a really easy time working on the portrait, and the portrait is almost exactly as I imagined it in my head when I started the painting. This idea actually came to me in the middle of a workout. But really, the biggest problem I had with it was the hands, of course. I had a really easy time figuring out the pose and the narrative and the line of sight and the composition. All of that was easy. It was just figuring out the hands which really bothered me, and more I rendered them, the less rendered they seemed to me. And because I was over-rendering them. And I've been kind of like discovering this inner fundamental. I've like had my own little personal epiphany, and I've talked about this before, how under-rendering can be like rendering. But I never really got to experience it so loudly as I did here in this painting. Under-rendering really was the reason why this painting is as successful as it is, however successful it is. Because I didn't try to render through any kind of really great cast shadow edge, or I wasn't trying to show off some super light source. The light source is so dim and it's so universal. There aren't any trailing cast shadows anywhere, so I didn't get a chance to dance around and have some fun with the shadows like I do with a lot of my portraits. I'm sure you guys have seen my latest stuff, and I've sent you guys pictures of everything over the last couple months, but I'm almost always messing around with some kind of cast shadow or some kind of really sharp dance around the eyes, and I didn't get a chance to do that today, with this painting, because all I had was this really dim universal and this secondary right here, this magic spell. And I wanted to keep it really low contrast because I wanted to go back and so let's merge the entire piece actually. Cancel, so new group, and then just put all of this in this group, duplicate the group, merge group. Let me just delete that. I wanted to do a little thing like this, where I had this like spell happening in between, and that's where that secondary light source was coming from, kind of like casting all these straight on back moving shadows. I was going to introduce some shadow around the nose, some secondary light source around the nose, and kind of just complete the painting and make it look as magical as it's supposed to. Mostly the detail of the sword was supposed to be missing because it was just supposed to be drowned in light as I imagined it. But that was all I had for this painting, and so I had to under render and pull off some kind of edge thing. So usually we have the edges, the contrast, the detail. I didn't have detail. I didn't want to do any detail. As you can see, I smudged a lot. I used a lot of smudging. The only detail was around the portrait, just to show his regal attitude. Of course, this is Merlin, and that's Excalibur. But I didn't have cast shadow edge work. I only had like the core object edge work, and that's all I had. So I had to figure out how to under render, and that means mid-tone, edge, and that's it. Very minimal shadow. If I was going to have anything that was eclipsed, I would just have it wherever, like the sleeve right here. But again, I didn't have many eclipses other than this hand. So this was as dark as I was going to go. Of course, this is not finished. I really wanted to finish it, and I didn't record it either. Usually I record these. It was just so experimental for me. It was so unlike me. But this is as much as I imagined, and I wanted to bring in a little bit of embroidery around the body. But after I under-rendered through rendered by under-rendering, which means just basic still tones dimmed according to their region, I decided not to bring in any more embroidery. I really wanted to make Merlin look like he was some kind of like royal, and not just like a roaming like nomad. I wanted to make him look royal and regal, and that's why I brought in all this symmetry and these folds and expensive fabric. At that point, I felt like I pulled it off by under-rendering it. I made him look regal and clean by not bringing in any super detail. I brought in some kind of seam detail around his tunic, these little pieces here. But that was all I needed, and it really did like hit me hard. I couldn't believe, like, I know I've been preaching it, but it was different for me to experience it personally. And when you were in a painting, you forget everything. Even if you're the teacher, you forget everything because you're in the anxiety of the painting. You're fighting the painting, you're fighting the canvas, so you kind of forget the stuff that gives you peace of mind, stuff like zoom out and all of that. And I did get caught in some areas where I was trying to detail. I was like, how am I going to get away with leaving the beard looking like nothing? I have to make the beard detail. I have to go in and draw some stuff. So I tried to drawing the beard hairs out and creating more detail around the beard, and I realized this is all wrong. This is not what this painting was about. I wanted it to look like it was all in one layer. Even though I did use layers, just for the sake of the convenience, I still wanted it to look like it was all in one layer. So drawing every single one of those hairs looked so artificial to me, so non-oil. So what I did was I tried to imagine how I would have tried to draw the hair by oil, and I wasn't allowed to use a small thin brush. I would just only use the bristle texture on that oil brush. So I just did just that. I stamped a couple of brush strokes just here. I mean, if you zoom up, they read as nothing. They read as nothing. And then you zoom out, and they're just reading exactly as I wanted them to. So learning to under render, learning to let go, think about the large molar shadows. Of course, that's always been the rule, but it was just something else, kind of reverse engineering those fundamentals and seeing them myself. So that's definitely one for the books, a definite journal entry for sure. Just remembering not to over render sometimes a little bit of texture around the hair. And that's all you really need. And it made me feel confident that I could pull this off. The face and everything was finished in one day. The hands were not finished. So by one day, I mean over 2 days, but like 3-hour painting sessions. So I consider a 6-hour painting session a full day of session of painting. 6 hours is as far as I can go. So I would probably say 6 hours for everything other than the hands, and that's pretty fast for me, especially because I was kind of messing around with the costume. So the costume had 2 different versions. The second half of those 6 hours was me just deleting the costume and trying another one, and deleting it and trying another one, or the whatever he's wearing. The face was done in like a 3-hour interval, 3-hour period. And the cast shadows, everything else. The sword was done in the same first 3 hours, and then everything after that. I could say I probably spent like 8 hours on it, and the first 3 hours are the most. I made the most changes, and the last like 5 hours were just me dicking around and learning this fundamental lesson, but learning it so personally, learning it so backwards. Instead of me being the teacher, I was at that point the student, and I couldn't take on teacher mode because I was trying to be creative. When I'm on teacher mode, I don't really get that creative when I'm teaching, because it's very technical and linear and do this and do this and do this. I had to just jump in and not let any critical voice take over, and just let the creativity, just so I can transfer the picture in my head as flawlessly as possible. And that's why it was so hard for me to just go back and, well, duh, of course, don't over render, but it's just something else when it's in there. So at this time, it kind of maybe gave me an insight how you guys are when I'm teaching you and showing you before and afters. I kind of make it look easy because the principle, the formula is one thing, but application is another. But yeah, like I said, that's definitely a point, and something I would, definite journal entry. Masterpieces are wonderful, but they do hinder you in the sense that they turn off teacher voice for too long. Everyone has a teacher voice. So I want always to think in studies, and that's when I have to go back, turn off the masterpiece mentality, and go back to studying. But after a while of studying, you kind of feel like you're falling off. And I wanted to test where my skills were, just as a little checkpoint. And masterpieces, as I said, are only good for a couple things, and one of the big ones is just knowing what you haven't learned yet, knowing what you haven't studied yet. I need to dedicate some time into hands. I need to dedicate some time into costume. I've kind of always known this, but I thought it would just improve as I go, as I critique, as I put in hours. But I need to go in really, really aggressively into costumes. My hands, I kind of pulled it off. But when it comes to costume, I really have to just take some time, get on Pinterest, make a wall, and just keep thinking about costumes. But that's it. That's all I've been up to recently. I've been so busy. I might not have a reward for you guys in August because the last 2 weeks of July I'm going to be recovering from a big surgery, which is standard. It's just outpatient, but it is not going to allow me to do any videos. I might just upload some of my latest work, but definitely not a voice video or kind of journal entry or any kind of tutorial or time lapse. By the way, I did record some of this, but I never recorded the portrait, so those first 3 hours I told you about, I did it just all off live. Nothing was on. It was just music, and I just drew, and I hadn't done that in a long time. Usually I'm always on stage. It felt different this time, just being off stage and just drawing for myself. It felt different, definitely. I felt like myself. I haven't felt that person in a long time. Because I've always been teacher, I've always been on screen and teaching and instructing and going back and making some mistakes and being just student, just plain old student. I really got to, for the sake of the diagnosis, just fully give it my all and see where my mistakes were. And I definitely discovered some of the biggest issues I have, just me personally. And I'm trying to figure out how to change my study habits, how to incorporate these lessons that I've learned into my private sessions with my students, make sure that they are well aware of what I just discovered. Again, I've always known this principle fundamental is there. Under rendering is rendering. But again, I've never really fully kind of just like let it sink in. And it definitely sunk in this time. A lot of people like this painting. A lot of them say it's nice. I've already seen issues with it. The crop is all wrong and kind of too wide, and just many problems here and there. But I hope you like today's video. I'm gonna try to make a little bit more of these, but more of like a personal journal entry. I'm enjoying kind of just turning off teacher mode for a little while, even just for Patreon, just for you guys. Kind of get a quick look into my life as just a student, no longer as a teacher. So I'll see you guys next month. I hope you liked this month's rewards. Thank you for your patronage. You guys are amazing. Bye.